Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. Today, we are sharing the body-worn camera footage of two officer-involved shootings. One took place on Friday, May 10th, in the 4700 block of Crawford Avenue. The other occurred on Tuesday, May 14th, in the area of South 3rd Street and West Kenton Avenue. Let me first start by saying the mission of any police department is to protect our community and serve citizens to the best of our ability. We work each day for a safer Louisville, but law enforcement is inherently a dangerous profession. The men and women of this department leave their homes each day knowing that they may face violent situations. In both situations, the individuals ultimately died. That affects their families. It is something that forever alters the officers involved, and it has a ripple effect in our community as a whole. That is why it is so important for LMPD to be as open as we possibly can without jeopardizing these investigations. Part of the transparency is sharing body-worn camera footage with the public in a timely fashion. As part of our officer-involved shooting protocol, LMPD's Public Integrity Unit will lead these investigations. We will do our best to release body-worn camera footage within 10 business days after the shooting, and we have stayed on track with that deadline so far. If for some reason we cannot meet the deadline, we will clearly communicate that to you. A copy of the case is turned over to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office for determination of final disposition. A copy will be provided to the Kentucky State Police for a thorough peer review, and a copy goes to the Louisville Office of Inspector General in compliance with our existing Memorandum of Understanding. 30 days after each incident has been reported to you, we will release follow-up information to you, the media, so that you're able to provide it to our community. And I personally supervise these investigations. We continue to ask the public to share any relevant information you have with us, and you can do so anonymously. Please reach out, 502-574-LMPD. With that, I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Stephen Healy, who will walk us through the body-worn camera footage from both shootings.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. We are going to go over first the officer-involved shooting on Crawford Avenue. Once again, I will reiterate to what the chief said. These videos can be hard to watch for some people. And I will go over first the procedures that we do when it comes to an officer-involved shooting. So here's the timeline. We will provide a brief overview of the preliminary information that we have, and that's generally done on the scene. Within 24 to 72 hours, that's when we will identify the involved officers to include their assignment, department photo, and any accommodations or disciplinary history. Within 10 business days, we will release the body-worn camera footage with a general explanation of the investigative process. Beyond 10 business days, criminal and administrative investigations will continue on all involved, including officers. There will be a consultation with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for a final disposition and performance review board internal assessment of the training and policy needs. Here's the in-depth process of how the body-worn camera is the production. We'll have the introductory statement, the curated video, and raw video will be released. The investigative process. Public Integrity Unit will be conducting these investigations of any officer-involved critical incident. They will lead the criminal investigation. They will consult with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for final disposition. Kentucky State Police will conduct an investigative review, a peer review, and per our MOU and agreement with the Office of the Inspector General, they will receive a copy of the investigation. The Professional Standards Unit will then review for any administrative or potential LMPD policy violations. The involved officers, they are placed on paid administrative leave pending the investigation. The chief has authority to take immediate disciplinary action. Prior to returning to duty, officers undergo psychological assessment and receive any necessary training. Post-investigation, the LMPD Performance Review Board will conduct a post-incident tactical debrief with all involved members to assess performance improvement and training needs. Findings of both criminal and administrative investigations will be made public. That is the second officer-involved shooting. Apologize. Okay, now we're going to talk about Crawford Avenue. Okay, the caller states that there is a stingray that is being used to get people out of their homes. The caller is saying his name is Nicholas Pierce. The caller is refusing to answer any of the call taker's questions. The caller does sound CIT. The caller is an unknown male rambling about why people are stealing from his trap house. Caller is yelling and asking why people took his stuff. The caller said he has a dog. Caller said, do not send a nice cop because he has a knife. With that information, a deflection worker is not going to be sent to this run. These will be the officers that are involved. Officer Christine Silk, Officer Noah Sheets, and Officer Bailey Segrist. Now, before we get into the video, there are a few talking points I want to go over and what you're going to see in this video. The run did come out as a theft. I showed you the run notes that the officer saw in their MDT. Those were typed verbatim. The call taker did try to establish any CIT relation, but the suspect refused to answer their questions. You're going to see that the officers did remain calm once on scene. They did transition to their CIT training. They kept a distance from the suspect. They called him by name, offered to take him to the hospital. These officers were confronted by a dual threat. Not only the suspect with the knife, but also they were under threat of a dog attack as well. Officers were called to this location earlier in the day by the suspect, and that was on a medical run. Officers were confronted by the suspect and his dog. EMS was on scene, and officer repeatedly told suspect they were there to help him, but the suspect refused to put his dog up. Both police and EMS cleared from the location due to the aggressive nature of the dog and the suspect's refusal to put the dog up. To be clear, that is the run earlier in the day. The knife that the suspect used was a K-bar. That is an issued United States Marine Corps fighting knife. It is 12 inches in length with a 7-inch blade. The suspect charged at these officers with the knife in a position of attack. It was not by his side, not in a sheath. The taser, you're going to see, was able to slow the suspect down as he closed the reactionary gap, but he immediately got back up and charged at the officers again. For those who are not familiar on how a taser works, the taser is deployed. There is a 5-second cycle. At this point, the 5-second cycle was over. The suspect immediately got back up. The suspect kept officers at bay with the knife as they made repeated commands for him to drop the knife so they could help him with life-saving measures. The suspect momentarily put the knife down, but then reached for it again, so officers approached to perform aid. Officers utilized kicks to the suspect's hand and arm, as well as kicking the knife away. Officers remained calm and showed compassion as life-saving measures were applied, such as a chest seal and tourniquet. We will now watch the video.
On Friday, May 10th, 2024, shortly before 11 p.m., LMPD 3rd Division officers were dispatched to a home on the 4700 block of Crawford Avenue on a report of a theft. The caller also stated to emergency call takers that he was armed with a knife. When officers arrived at the home, they encountered a man coming out of the house armed with a large knife. Officers gave repeated commands to drop the knife, but the subject refused. Instead, he advanced on the officers and he charged at the officers with the large knife in his hand, while also appearing to give commands to his dog to attack the officers as well. As the individual continued towards the officers, they deployed tasers which had limited effect. 3 LMPD officers discharged their firearms, and the suspect proceeded to charge at them with the large knife remaining in his hand. The individual continued holding them at bay with the knife, preventing officers from rendering immediate aid. Ultimately, they were able to disarm him and perform medical aid. Medics transported the subject to University of Louisville Hospital, where he died from his injuries on Sunday, May 12, 2024. What you're about to view is body-worn camera footage from the officers who discharged their firearms. In accordance with LMPD procedure, the officers were placed on administrative leave. The LMPD Public Integrity Unit is the lead on the investigation. Upon completion of its investigation, LMPD will present the case to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office for a final criminal disposition. A copy of the investigation will be turned over to the Kentucky State Police for peer review, and a copy will go to the Louisville Office of Inspector General. Please be advised that this statement is a preliminary account of what our investigation has revealed thus far.
Hey, Nicholas! Metro Police! Nicholas! What's he saying in there?
Just back up, alright. Just wait. Because there's no one in there, so just give yourself space.
Yeah. Did you hear what he was saying in there by chance?
He's saying get him, get him, get him.
He does have a dog.
Yeah, I know, that's why he's saying that.
Nicholas! Let's go to the hospital, man. Come on. I'm not fucking around. Put the knife down. I'm fucking trap house. Do not come outside. I'm coming out this fucking door. You come outside, you put that knife down. You stole my trap house. Put the knife down. Motherfucker. Put the knife down. That's why I'm so fucking pissed. You ain't gonna be able to the escalator if I stole something from you. Put the knife down, Jen. Put the knife down. Come on, Jen. Put the knife down. Put that down. Drop the knife down! Drop it! Put the knife down! Drop the knife! Drop it! Come on. Put the knife down! Put it down! Put the knife down! Drop it! Drop the knife down! Come on. Finish me, come on. Put the knife down! Come on, man. Come on, they stole my trap house, man. They stole my trap house. Come on. Oh, they stole my trap house. Damn it, they stole my trap house. Hey, drop the knife! I'm a fucking soldier, man. Drop the knife! I can't. Put the knife down. Drop it. Put the knife down. Drop it so we can help you. Dude. Drop the knife. Dude. Hey, watch out. There's a dog. He's trying to stick it on us. They fucking stole my trap house. The door's open on the left where the dog is. Drop the knife, buddy. Hey, I'm not gonna drop it. I'm almost dead. You're not gonna die. Just drop the knife. Hey, drop the knife so we can help you guys.
Hey, drop the knife, okay?
You guys.
Drop the knife. Listen,
Come out to my house.
Can you please drop the knife so I can help you?
When they stole my ID. And they stole some specific pills. They fucking killed me anyway. Okay? God damn it.
Hey, I'm gonna go
You
grab
pissed
my
me
bag.
off.
No.
Will you piss me off?
No, let's help you.
Promise we can help you. No. Come on. Y'all did steal something?
Drop the knife.
Y'all did steal something?
Sir, drop the knife so we can help
Drop the
you.
knife.
God damn it.
Drop the knife
Oh,
so I can help you.
they fucking put a bounty on me, man. I didn't have no fucking crime. I'm nothing. Hey! Put the knife down!
Stop! Roll over on your stomach! Roll over on your fucking stomach right now! Roll over on your stomach!
Hey, y'all!
Who's got
Hey,
the
y'all!
Glove him up!
Hey, y'all! Hey, y'all! Hey, y'all! Hey, y'all! Hey, y'all!
Shine a light! Light!
Hey, y'all! Ah, shit.
Someone else.
Oh, okay.
Lights. Just leave it right there.
Can you set my leg real quick, officer? I got more. Can you stretch my leg?
Stretch the leg out.
Stretch it out. Pause. Stay down. Oh,
Got one.
I wish you didn't have to handcuff me.
I know, baby, I'm sorry.
You didn't give us a lot of options.
Well, you know what? I'm telling you. They stole some shit out of our fucking house, dude. People use this goddamn stingray.
I got a problem.
I'm gonna pause this just for a minute. This is the knife that the suspect had. Those wires that you see around there are from the taser. So basically, like we said earlier, all life is sacred, and we must make our decisions based on who is in imminent danger and who has the ability to control the situation. The individual that had control of that situation was the suspect. He was given repeated commands to drop the knife. He was told that we were there to help him. The officer, like I said earlier, kept a distance from him, called him by name, offered to take him to the hospital. As I stated earlier as well, the officers were under imminent danger from two different sources, the knife attack and also the dog attack. So, and then we utilized the Graham factors to determine whether that use of force was justified, which would have been the severity of the crime. The individual was charging at the officers with a knife in an attack form. The immediacy of the threat, you could see how soon he closed that reactionary gap from the house to when he was tased, and then immediately got back up after the 5-second cycle. What was his resistance level? You could see he continued to hold that knife and keep officers at bay, even after being tased, shot, and was still on the ground, and officers trying to get him to provide life-saving measures. And did he try and get away from them? No, he did not. So, at this time, I'll open it up to questions.
How unusual is it for somebody to be able to get back up that quick? Sorry, I'm Mark Vanderoff with WLKY News. How unusual is it for somebody to be able to get up that quick after getting tased? And how unusual is it for somebody to be that awake? And he's like talking and stuff after he's been shot.
Mark, that's a good question. And for those who didn't hear, the question was, how different is it for an individual to react like that and be able to get up after being tased and basically show a little effect? Tasers are not 100% effective, and they can affect different people in different ways. Depending on where the prongs were deployed, were they far enough away? Was he able to discharge those probes? Would it have prevented the officers from being able to recycle and deliver another 5-second cycle? However, you have to look at, there was an individual coming at them with a military-grade knife in an attack formation. It showed how quick that reactionary gap was that he closed. There was that was a justified deadly force encounter. Less lethal was there as the option, and we saw how that affected him, or lack thereof.
Stefan Johnson from WDRB News. Can you talk about kind of the trauma that officers go through as well? Because they obviously were trying to help them, and then Chief has said this before, officers never go into a situation wanting to shoot someone.
Good question, Stefan. And to repeat what he asked, how do these situations affect the officers and the trauma that they see? Our officers see trauma on a daily basis. We may see things that the normal, ordinary person may only see twice in their lifetime. We may see it multiple times in a shift or in a week. It is very hard when you are wanting to help someone, and you will clearly see that in the raw footage that we're going to release. Officers were pleading with him to put the knife down so they could save him. They remained calm at the situation. There's even at one point where one of the officers is cradling this individual's head while they're trying to put a chest seal on him. And these officers go home with that every single day. No officer that I've talked to in my 24 years of being a law enforcement officer has wanted to come to work and decided, I want to shoot somebody today. That's not what we want to do. We want to help them. From the initial run that was made there that day until after the force was used, these officers were still compassionate, wanted to save this individual.
Paul Miles, WHAS Radio. When an officer or officers in this instance use their tasers after that first initial tase, is that the only time they can use that particular taser? Then they have to resort to lethal force? Is the taser finished with?
Good question, Paul. And the question is, after the first initial deployment of the taser, is it over with? The situation's going to dictate that. Is this individual armed? Was the taser effective? Could the taser have been reused? It could have been. Or was it not effective? Was there a malfunction with the taser? Did the suspect have such a resistance to it that it wasn't effective? So when you have to take a totality of all the factors to determine whether or not we could have just kept tasing him, or was this individual a deadly threat to our officers, which he was.
I'm curious about the officers at the scene. They called to him by his first name. Were all three officers, were they familiar with Nicholas Pierce, and were they familiar with his mental health issues?
I know at least one officer was familiar with him because he had made a previous run there and had arrested him at that location. But also, if you noticed in the run notes, he did state what his name was.
Just a follow-up here. You mentioned that the, you described it as a deflection worker. Why did this situation not call for the deflection worker to be called?
That's a good question as well, David. And what he's asking is, why was deflection not called in the original run? He clearly stated that he was armed. He did state, I have a knife. Don't send a nice police officer. He refused to answer any call takers' questions because sometimes the call takers can try, they will ask a series of questions to determine what is the appropriate response to that run. This definitely was a police run. There was a report of a theft and the threat that he had a knife as well. The deflection officer or worker is not going to be able to take a theft run, and we're not going to send somebody there when the suspect clearly says that he has a knife and is making threatening overtones.
So does a threat immediately preclude sending a deflection
One question.
person?
Italian.
Well, really, just for clarification,
I'll
is
clarify
that policy
afterwards.
that
I'll
the
clarify
deflection
afterwards.
worker is not sent if there's a threat of violence?
Correct, and you would have to go through the EOC, and they went through an extensive process to put that plan and that process together, and we don't want to send someone there who their life could be in danger. Ms. Tapper.
Just logistically, only one officer fired his weapon, or was it multiple, and how many times?
Good question, Natalia. The question was, how many officers fired their weapon and how many shots were fired? 3 officers were placed on administrative leave for discharging their firearms. We're not going to go into what the round count was or anything like that. That'll be in the complete investigative review.
But more than one officer struck the suspect?
3 officers discharged their firearms.
Rachel Smith with the Courier Journal. For the run that happened earlier that day, where it was kind of like a medical emergency response, what was the outcome of that? I know that you mentioned that EMS were there and then they
For one, it wasn't going to be possible for EMS to come treating because the dog was in a very aggressive manner. He had the dog by the collar to hold him back. Repeated requests were made by the officer, and the officer kept a distance away from him. I believe he was even standing in the yard next door and saying, "We're just here to help you. We're here to help you. They can't help you until you put the dog up. I'm not here to arrest you. Nobody's here to do any of that." He refused to put that dog up, which was acting in an aggressive manner, and therefore the police officers cleared the scene, and as did EMS.
Last question, Ian. Ian Hardwick, WHAS 11 News. In that time between the first and the last call, I mean, is there anything y'all can do in that situation to try and diffuse that?
That's a good question. What could have been done in between that first call and that second call? That first call, I mean, it was cleared. We went there to help him. It was a medical run. And you got to think there's two different runs here. The first one is a medical run. He's calling for medical assistance. He refused to put that dog up. The second run was, there was a theft run, and we couldn't establish whether it was a CIT or not, based off the initial call taker's questions, his refusal to answer those. These were also done on two different shifts. One was earlier in the day, done by day work. The second one was later in the evening, done by late watch.
Thank you all.
We ready? Once again, we're going to talk about the officer-involved shooting. This one will be from Kenton Avenue. Once again, this video will be hard to watch. As we have stated earlier, someone did lose their life in this video, and that is always hard for some people to see. We will go over the timeline of events. We will go over the video, and I will go over the investigative process that LMPD uses in all critical incidents for anything officer involved. So, the critical incident timeline. Once we are on scene, the chief or members of the executive staff will provide a brief overview of what we know at the time. Within 24 to 72 hours, we'll identify the involved officers and include their current assignment, department photo, and commendations disciplinary history. Identification of involved suspects. Per state law, the coroner will release the identity of the deceased. Within 10 business days, we will release body-worn camera footage with general explanation of the investigative process. Beyond 10 business days, criminal and administrative investigations will continue on all involved, including the officers. Consultation with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for a final disposition. The Performance Review Board and internal assessment of training and policy needs. In-depth process, the body-worn camera production. There'll be an introductory statement. There'll be curated video from LMPD. The video you'll see will describe the entire investigative process, will show all relevant camera footage, and contain relevant dispatch clips. The raw video, only edited for sensitive contact, will be shared along with curated video. The investigative process, the Public Integrity Unit, they will lead the criminal investigation. They will consult with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for final disposition of the case. Kentucky State Police will conduct a thorough investigative peer review. The Office of the Inspector General will receive a copy of the investigation. Professional Standards Unit will then look at the case over for any administrative investigation or any potential LMPD policy violations. The involved officers. Officers are placed on paid administrative leave pending the investigation. The chief has authority to take immediate disciplinary action. Prior to returning to duty, officers undergo psychological assessment and receive any necessary training. Post-investigation. The LMPD Performance Review Board will conduct a post-incident tactical debrief with all involved members to assess performance improvement and training needs. Findings of both criminal and administrative investigations will be made public. The officer involved in this incident is Detective Benjamin Derby. He was hired 2/20 of 2020, and his current assignment is Criminal Investigation Division. Criminal Interdiction Division. We're going to show this video and kind of give you an overview of what you're going to see. The detectives were aware of who this suspect was. They were conducting surveillance on him as he was a known homicide suspect. Detectives waited for the suspect to come outside of the store so they were not engaging him in what could have been a crowded business. When approached by the detectives, the suspect produced a firearm and began to run. Officers were able to get the suspect to the ground, but he refused to release the weapon after repeated commands. Officers identified that the suspect had the gun pointed at a dwelling. After identifying that the weapon was pointed at a dwelling, K-9 was on scene, and when instructed to let go of the weapon or the K-9 would be deployed, the suspect fired one round in the direction of the K-9 handler, arresting detectives, and the dwelling. Detective Derby had placed himself as the cover officer with deadly force option as the suspect was still refusing to relinquish the firearm. You're going to hear two very distinct pops. The first will be the suspect discharging his firearm, and the second will be Detective Derby discharging his service weapon. Once the suspect fired his shot towards the K-9 handler, arresting detectives, and the dwelling, Detective Derby discharged his firearm and de-escalated the deadly force encounter with one single shot.
On Tuesday, May 14, 2024 at 3 p.m., officers from LMPD's Criminal Interdiction Division were conducting surveillance in the area of South 3rd and West Kenton Avenue regarding an ongoing homicide investigation. Detectives observed a person of interest from a homicide that occurred the previous week. There had been a recent uptick in homicides, which officers were seeking to mitigate. When officers approached the homicide suspect, he displayed a firearm and began to run from detectives. Detectives were able to tackle the armed suspect and began to wrestle for the gun in the suspect's hand. After multiple requests to release the gun, the suspect discharged the firearm, at which point one officer discharged his own service weapon, striking the suspect one time. Officers rendered aid and called for medics. The individual, a 17-year-old Hispanic male, was transported to University of Louisville Hospital with life-threatening injuries. He was subsequently pronounced deceased at the hospital. No officers were injured and no other members of the public were injured. What you are about to view is body-worn camera footage from the incident. In accordance with LMPD procedure, the officer who discharged his firearm was placed on administrative leave. The LMPD Public Integrity Unit is the lead on this investigation. Upon completion of its investigation, LMPD will present the case to the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office for a final criminal disposition. A copy of the investigation will be turned over to the Kentucky State Police for peer review, and a copy will go to the Louisville Office of Inspector General.
He's down the street now. Red slides, black jeans, navy blue hoodie. You might be able to see him here in just a second, Stick. Do you see him?
Yeah, I see him. But there is no little kid. The one in the cap is going to be the target.
We're ready. I'm scooping up right now. Are they coming up 3rd Street? 3rd Street at the corner. About to go to the corner store. It looks like going northbound.
Don't rush it. They're going into the corner store. We can get it when we get out. Just park.
Stop. Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Don't run. Put the gun down. Put the gun down. Right now. Drop the gun. Drop the gun. What's the gun? Yeah. Where's it at? It's under him. It's under him. It's under him.
Where is it? Where is it?
It's under him.
Lift him up.
Let
Let me get this hand.
Get the hand.
Let me get this hand.
Listen. Somebody get the right hand.
I got this on. I got this hand.
I got his. Listen,
the gun?
he's still got it in his hand.
Okay.
Listen, dude, grab his hand.
You're on my hand, standing.
I got you close. Let go of the fucking gun, dude.
I
got it between his legs.
Drop the gun.
Let go of the gun, bro.
Drop the gun now.
Listen.
You're gonna get
The
shot.
muzzle of this gun is pointed at this house, okay? He has a gun in his hand. Let go of the fucking gun, dude.
Back up.
Listen, I have the slide, okay?
If you do anything, you're gonna get shot.
Listen to me. This dog is gonna rip your fucking skin open. Let go of this gun. We ain't gonna shoot. Stop. Oh my God.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Shots fired. Get in your mouth. Shots fired.
He shot himself. No, he didn't.
No, Jared, I shot him.
Who shot him?
I did.
Shots fired on us.
10-4. Hey, switch over.
It's under him. Look, lift him up.
Lift him up. I got it.
Let me get this hand.
Listen. Somebody get the right hand.
I got this on. I got this hand.
I got his. Listen,
the gun?
he's still got it in his hand.
Okay.
Listen, dude, grab his hand.
You're on my hand, standing.
I got you close. Let go of the fucking gun, dude.
I
got him
this on.
between his legs.
Drop the gun or you're gonna get
Let go of the
shot.
gun, bro.
Gun now.
Drop it or you're gonna get
The
shot.
muzzle of this gun is pointed at this house, okay? He has a gun in his hand. Let go of the fucking gun, dude.
Jared, back up in case I got contact.
Okay?
If you do anything, you're gonna get shot. Do you understand me?
Listen to me. This dog is gonna rip your fucking skin open. Let go of this gun. We ain't gonna shoot you. Oh my God.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Shots fired. Get in your mouth. Shots fired.
Hey, Ace 1080.
He shot himself.
No, Jared, I shot him.
Who shot him?
I did.
Shots fired on us. Get in the car.
I'm gonna pause it there for just a second. I know how hard that was to watch. This suspect had clearly shown a disregard for human life by suspected involvement in a homicide, refusing to drop the handgun when ordered to by detectives, and while both running and on the ground, and the discharge of the said firearm. Had these officers relinquished control of the suspect, there was a very good likelihood there could have been injuries to officers or citizens on this busy street by the suspect discharging his firearm, as he had clearly established he had no regard for human life. This firearm, you will see this is the shell casing that was fired at the scene. You had officers that were with him on the ground. They clearly stated the gun was pointed at the residence, and when K-9 closed that distance, the K-9, the K-9 handler, and the officers were also in the line of fire of this weapon. This weapon was identified through testing as the firearm that was used in the homicide of David Martinez at Crittenden Drive and Waterston Expressway. These detectives are tasked daily with getting violent offenders and trigger pullers off our streets while putting their lives in danger. These detectives displayed tactics in attempting to take this violent suspect into custody. While the loss of any life is tragic, this suspect's actions forced the officers to react with deadly force to end the threat. Here are our safety priorities. As we said, all life is sacred, and I know watching these videos is hard to watch. But we must make decisions based on who is in imminent danger and who has the ability to control this situation. If there were inhabitants in that dwelling, you had a canine, the canine handler, you had officers arresting, trying to get this handgun from this suspect, and he refused to put it down. All the while on a crowded street at that time of day, there was a lot of danger going on right there. And who had the ability to control that situation? The individual. He could have dropped that weapon at any time. He did not have to produce it. When the officers immediately got out and identified themselves as the police, he could have done that. I know when you saw the initial video, when they were describing what they were seeing, who they were looking for, the screen appeared black, and then the video showed. When they are doing surveillance on individuals, we will have our vests on that clearly identify us as police. But if we're sitting in the car, we don't want the individual that we are surveilling on to see that. So once we make that decision to get out of the car, we can take that off and it's clearly displayed that we're the police, that we identify themselves when we go to make a police action. And once again, we will take into consideration the Graham factors on whether or not this force was justified or not. The severity of the crime, once again, it was a known, wanted homicide suspect who was clearly armed, who produced a firearm, refused to relinquish said firearm, and discharged the firearm. His resistance level, he was not going to let that gun go. And his initial flight was to get away, but once we had him on the ground, he once again refused to put down that weapon, and he discharged it. So, with that, we'll open up to questions. Mark?
Mark Vanderoff, WLKY News. Were you able to confirm with 100% certainty that it was the suspect, the 17-year-old, that fired the initial gunshot? And is that even relevant given the Graham factors?
It is. You could clearly see when you watch the video, you hear the first initial pop. They have gave repeated commands to release that weapon. When K9 comes up, and they also give the warning with the K9, that is when you hear the pop from him, and then you will hear the pop, and if you see it, like if it was in boxed, or when you look at it in the different times, you hear the pop from the individual, then you hear the pop from Detective Derby.
Stefan Johnson from WDRB News. Can you delve into how confident you are? I know you said that the gun was used in the homicide, but how confident are you that this was the person who committed the homicide?
Good question, Stefan. How confident are we that this individual was the one that committed the homicide? Based not getting into the details of the homicide investigation, he was clearly identified as a suspect in the homicide. That's why the Criminal Interdiction Division detectives were out there conducting surveillance on him. And once again, testing did reveal that that is the weapon that was used in the homicide.
Paul Miles with HAS Radio. In an incident like this where you have a physical confrontation trying to get a gun away from the suspect, why is the taser not an option?
Well, Paul, that's a good question. Why is the taser not an option? Okay, we have an individual down. We are trying to wrestle. We know he has a gun. And we are trying to get him to drop the gun. We are in close proximity to him. One, when that taser is deployed, to get the taser to really be effective, you want to have it spread. As you can see how many officers were on the ground with him. Would the taser have been effective? I don't know. But we are dealing with an individual with a gun that is refusing to put it down. He's a homicide suspect. Would it have been effective? I'm not aware of any of those. I'm sure once the investigation goes through the PIU-PSU process and officers become interviewed, that could be determined in the interview process. Nothing that I saw in this video would show that.
With, several officers, on the ground with the suspect being so close to him, was it like part of the officers, like, did the officer fulfill his training in, firing that, gun when there was officers so close to him? Where it could have potentially, if it was, off at all, that other officers could have potentially been hurt? Or was there ways that this could have been, better?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that question. The question was, did the officer follow his training with so many officers around him and when he decided to discharge that firearm? If you watched in the video when Detective Derby came up and they were trying to wrestle with this individual, it was obvious he was not releasing this gun. He told the one officer to move over, "I am your cover, officer." So that let that officer know he has lethal force ready to deploy if he needs to. He had him moved over, and at that point, as hard as I know how hard this is to watch. That distance was closed. That was the target that was presented to that officer to end the threat, and that was probably the safest way to do that. Like I said, when we talked about the individual earlier, he's wanted for a homicide. He has a gun. He is refusing to put it down. He even fires a shot after repeated commands. That was the most effective way and probably the safest way to end that situation, especially when you're talking about a crowded street. And then you also have to take into factor what time of day it is on this street. You're dealing with a populated neighborhood area.
Ian Hardwick, WHAS 11 News. It didn't sound like the victim suspect in that scenario had much to say. Do you think there was a language barrier there at all between officers?
That's a good question. Was there a language barrier? It didn't sound like he had too much to say. That can be determined through either officer interviews. I know we gave repeated commands to drop that weapon, and the suspect refused to. That will be further determined in the investigation.